Section 13 of the Best Short Stories of 1917. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Rel. The Best Short Stories of 1917 by Various. The Emperor of Elam by H. G. Dwight. Part 6. Sex. 2 days later, or not quite 3 days later, the galley and the motorboat, whose accidental encounter brought about the events of this narrative, met again. This second meeting took place in the Karun, as before, but at a point some 50 or 60 miles below Bundaker. And now the moon, not the sun, cast its paler glitter between the high dark banks of the stream. It was a keen-eared young lure who first heard afar the pant of the mysterious genie. Before he or his companions descried the motorboat, however, Gaston, rounding a sharp curve above the island of Adnachl, caught sight of the sweeps of the barge flashing in the moonlight. The unexpected view of that flash was not disagreeable to Gaston, for, as Gaston put it to himself, he was sad, despite the efforts of his friend, the telegraph operator at Awaz, to cheer him up. It is true that the operator, who was Irish and a man of heart, had accorded him but a limited amount of cheer, together with hard words, not a few. Recalling them, Gaston picked up a knife that lay on the seat beside him, an odd curved knife of the country, in a leather sheath. There is no reason why I should conceal the fact that this knife was a gift from Gaston's Bakhtiari henchman, who had presented it to Gaston with immense solemnity on hearing that there was a war in Ferenghistan, and that the young men of the oil works were going to it. What had become of that type of a Bakhtiari? Gaston wondered. Then, spying the flash of those remembered oars, he bethought him of the seigneur of a Brazilian whose hospitable yacht, he had reason to know, was not destitute of cheer. When he was near enough the barge to make out the shadow of the high beak on the moonlit water, he cut off the motor. The sweeps forthwith ceased to flash. Gaston then called out the customary salutation. It was answered, as before, by the deep voice of the Brazilian. He stood at the rail of the barge as the motorboat glided alongside. "Ah, mon vieux, you are alone this time," said Mahine genially. "Where are the others?" "I do not figure to myself," answered Gaston. "Did you derange yourself to inquire for my sacred devil of a Bakhtiari, who has taken the key of the fields? As for Monsieur Guy, the Englishman you saw the other time, whose name does not pronounce itself, he has gone to the war. I just took him and 3 others to Awaz, where they meet more of their friends and all go together on the steamer to Mohammed." "Really? And did you hear any news at Awaz?" "The latest is that England has declared war." "Tiens!" exclaimed Mahine. His voice was extraordinarily loud and deep in the stillness of the river. It impressed Gaston, who sat looking up at the dark figure in front of the ghostly lures. What types with their black hats of a theatre! He hoped the absence of Monsieur Guy and the Brazilian's evident surprise would not cloud the latter's hospitality. He was accordingly gratified to hear the Brazilian say, after a moment, "And they tell us that the madness is not catching?" But we, at least, have not lost our heads, eh? To prove it, Monsieur Gaston, will you not come aboard a moment, if you are not in too much of a hurry, and drink a little glass with me? Gaston needed no urging. In a trice he had tied his boat to the barge and was on the deck. The agreeable Brazilian was not too much of a seigneur to shake his hand in welcome, or to lead him into the cabin where a young lure was in the act of lighting candles. "It is so hot, and so many strange beasts fly about this river," Mahine explained, "that I usually prefer to travel without a light. But we must see the way to our mouths. What will you have? Beer, Bordeaux, champagne?" Gaston considered this serious question with attention. "Since Monsieur has the goodness to inquire if Monsieur has any of that fine champagne I tasted before." "Ah, yes, certainly." And he gave a rapid order to the lure. Then he stood silent, his eyes fixed on the reed portiere. Gaston was more impressed than ever as he stood too, beret in hand, looking around the little saloon, so oddly, yet so comfortably fitted out with rugs and skins. Presently the lure reappeared through the reed portiere, which aroused the Brazilian from his abstraction. He filled the 2 glasses himself, waving his attendant out of the cabin, and handed one to Gaston. The other he raised in the air, bowing to his guest. "To the victor," he said, "and sit down, won't you? There is more than 1 glass in that bottle." Gaston was enchanted to sit down and to sip another cognac. "But, monsieur," he exclaimed, looking about again, "you travel like an emperor." "Ho!" laughed Mahine, with a quick glance at Gaston. "I am well enough here, but there is one difficulty." He looked at his glass, holding it up to the light. "I travel too slowly." Gaston smiled. "In Persia, who cares?" "Well, it happens that at this moment I do. I have affairs at Mohamera, and in this tub it will take me 3 days more at the best, without considering that I shall have to wait till daylight to get through the rocks at Awas." He lowered his glass and looked back at Gaston. "Tell me, why shouldn't you take me down ahead of my tub, eh? Or to Sabla, if Mohamera is too far. It would not delay you so much, after all. You can tell them any story you like at Shelelelie. Otherwise, I am sure we can make a satisfactory arrangement." He put his hand suggestively into his pocket. Gaston considered it between sips. It really was not much to do for this uncle of America, who had been so amiable, and others had suddenly become so much less amiable than their wont. Moreover, that Bakhtiari he might repent when he heard the motor again. At any rate, one could say that one had waited for him, and the Brazilian would no doubt show a gratitude so handsome that one could afford to be a little independent. If those on the steamer asked any questions when the motorboat passed, surely the Brazilian, who was more of a seigneur than any employee of an oil company, would know how to answer. "Allons, why not?" he said aloud. "Bravo!" cried the Brazilian. withdrawing his hand from his pocket. "Take that as part of my ticket, and excuse me a moment while I make arrangements." He disappeared through the reed portiere, leaving Gaston to admire 5 shining Napoleons. It gave him an odd sensation to see, after so long, those coins of his country. When Mahine finally came back, it was through the inner door. "Tell me, how much can you carry?" he asked. "I have 4 boxes I would like to take with me, besides a few small things. These fools might wreck themselves at Awaz and lose everything in the river. It would annoy me very much. After all the trouble I have had to collect my objects of virtue. Besides, the tub will get through more easily without them. Come in and see." "Mon Dieu!" exclaimed Gaston, scratching his head when he saw. "My boat won't get through more easily with them, especially at night." He looked curiously around the cozy stateroom. "But it will take them, eh? If necessary, we can land them at ours and have them carried around the rapids." The thing took some maneuvering, but the lures, with the help of much fluent profanity from the master, finally accomplished it without sinking the motorboat. Gaston, sitting at the wheel to guard his precious engine against some clumsiness of the black-hatted mountaineers, looked on with humorous astonishment at this turn of affairs. He was destined, it appeared, to be disappointed in his hope of cheer. That cognac was really very good. If only one had had more of it. Still, one at least had company now, and he was not the man to be insensible to the fine champagne of the unexpected. Nor was he unconscious that of many Baroque scenes at which he had assisted, this was not the least Baroque. When the 4th chest had gingerly been lowered into place, Mahine vanished again. Presently he reappeared, followed by his majordomo, to whom he gave instructions in a low voice. Then he stepped into the stern of the boat. The majordomo, taking 2 portmanteaus and a rug from the lures behind him, handed them down to Gaston. Having disposed of them, Gaston stood up, his eyes on the lures, who crowded the rail. "Well, my friend," said Mahine gaily, "for whom are you waiting? We shall yet have opportunities to admire the romantic scenery of the Karun." "Ah, monsieur takes no other object to virtue with him?" "Have you so much room?" laughed Mahine. "It is a good thing there is no wind tonight. Go ahead." Gaston cast off, backed a few feet, reversed, and described a wide circle around the stern of the barge. It made a strange picture in the moonlight, with its black curved beak and its spectral crew. They shifted to the other rail as the motorboat came about, watching silently. "To your oars!" shouted Mahine at them. "Row, sons of burnt fathers! Will you have me wait a month for you at Mohamera?" They scattered to their places, and Gaston caught the renewed flash of the sweeps as he turned to steer for the bend. It was a good thing, he told himself, that there was no wind tonight. The gunwale was nearer the water than he or the boat cared for. She made nothing like her usual speed. However, he said nothing. Neither did Mahine, until the dark shadow of Amenachel divided the glitter in front of them. "Take the narrower channel," he ordered then, and when they were in it, he added, "Stop, will you, and steer in there, under the shadow of the shore? I think we would better fortify ourselves for the work of the night. I, at least, did not forget the cognac among my other objects of virtue. They fortified themselves accordingly, the Brazilian producing cigars as well. He certainly was an original, thought Gaston, now hopeful of experiencing actual cheer. That originality proved itself anew when, after a much longer period of refreshment than would suit most gentlemen in a hurry, the familiar flash became visible in the river behind them. "Now be quiet," commanded the extraordinary uncle of America. "Whatever happens, we mustn't let them hear us. If they take this channel, we will slip down and run part way up the other. We shall give them a little surprise." Near and nearer came the flash, which suddenly went out behind the island. A recurrent splash succeeded it, and a wild, melancholy singing. The singing and the recurrent splash grew louder, filled the silence of the river, grew softer, and presently the receding oars flashed again below the island. But not until the last glint was lost in the shimmer of the water, the last sound had died out of the summer night, did the Brazilian begin to unfold his surprise. "Que diable allait-on faire dans cette galère?" he exclaimed. "It's the first time I ever knew them to do the right thing. Let us drink one more little glass to the good fortune of their voyage. And here, by the way, is another part of my ticket." He handed Gaston 5 more Napoleons. "But now, my friend, we have some work. I see we shall never get anywhere with all this load. Let us therefore consign our objects of virtue to the safe keeping of the river. He will guard them better than anybody. Is it deep enough here?" It was deep enough, but what an affair getting those heavy chests overboard! The last one nearly pulled Machin in with it. One of the clamps caught in his clothes, threw him against the side of the boat, and jerked something after it into the water. He sat down, swearing softly to himself, to catch his breath and investigate the damage. "It was only my revolver," he announced, "and we have no need of that, since we are not going to the war. Now, my good Gaston, I have changed my mind. We will not go down the river, after all. We will go up." Gaston, this time, stared at him. "Up? But, monsieur, the barge—" "What is my barge to you, dear Gaston? Besides, it is no longer mine. It now belongs to the Sheikh of Mohammed, with whatever objects of virtue it still contains. He has long teased me for it, and none of them can read the note they are carrying to him. Didn't I tell you I was going to give them a little surprise? Well, there it is. I am not a man, you see, to be tied to objects of virtue. Which reminds me, where are my portmanteaus?" "Here, on the trunk." "Fais, and you, chauffeur, give them to me. I will arrange myself a little. As for you, turn around and see how quickly you can carry me to the charming resort of Bondicoeur, where Antigonus fought Eumenes and the silver shields for the spoils of Susa and won them. Did you ever hear, Gaston, of that interesting incident? Monsieur is too strong for me, replied Gaston cryptically. He took off his cap, wiped his face, and sat down at the wheel. If a man is not strong, what is he? Rejoined Machin. But you will not find this cigar too strong, he added amicably. Gaston did not. What he found strong was the originality of his passenger, and the way that cognac failed, in spite of its friendly warmth, to cheer him, for he kept thinking of that absurd Bakhtiari, and of the telegraph operator, and of Monsieur Guy, and the others, as he sped northward on the silent moonlit river. This is very well, Gaston? Uttered the Brazilian at last. We march better without our objects of virtue? Gaston felt that he smiled as he lay smoking on his rug in the bottom of the boat. But tell me, he went on presently, how is it, if I may ask, that you didn't happen to go in the steamer too with your Monsieur Guy? You do not look to me either old or incapable. There it was, the same question, which really seemed to need no answer at first, but which somehow became harder to answer every time. Why was it? And how could it spoil so good a cognac? How is it? Repeated Gaston. It is, monsieur, that France is a great lady who does not derange herself for a simple vagabond like Gaston, or about whose liaisons or quarrels it is not for Gaston to concern himself. This great lady has naturally not asked my opinion about this quarrel. But if she had, I would have told her that it is very stupid for everybody in Europe to begin shooting at each other. Why? Simply because it pleases ces messieurs, the Austrians, to treat ces messieurs, the Serbs de haut en bas. What have I to do with that? Besides, this great lady is very far away, and by the time I arrive, she will have arranged her affair. In the meantime, there are many others, younger and more capable than I, whose express business it is to arrange such affairs. Will one pew-pew more or less change the result of one battle? Of course not. And if I should lose my hand or my head, who would buy me another? Not France. I have seen a little what France does in such cases. My own father left his leg at Gravelotte, together with his job and my mother's peace. I have seen what happened to her, and how it is that I am a vagabond, about whom France has never troubled herself. He shouted it over his shoulder, above the noise of the motor, with an increasing loudness. Also, he went on, I have duties not so far away as France, up there at chez l'Allier. There will perhaps be next month a little Gaston. If I go away, who will feed him? I have not the courage of monsieur, who separates himself so easily from objects of virtue. Voilà. Machin said nothing for a moment. Then, courage, yes. One needs a little courage in this curious world. There was a pause, as the boat cut around a dark curve. But do not think, my poor Gaston, that it is I who blame you. On the contrary, I find you very reasonable, more reasonable than many ministers of state. If others in Europe had been able to express themselves like you, Gaston, Monsieur Guy and his friends would not have run away so suddenly. It takes courage, too, not to run after them. He made a sound as if changing his position, and presently he began to sing softly to himself. Monsieur would make a fortune in the Café Chantant, commented Gaston. He began to feel, at last, after the favorable reception of his speech, a little cheered. He felt cooler, too, in this quiet rushing moonlight of the river. What is it that Monsieur sings? It seems to me that I've heard that air. Very likely you have, Gaston. It is a little song of sentiment, sung by all the sentimental young ladies of the world. He who wrote it, however, was far from sentimental. He was a fellow countryman of mine, and of the late Abraham, who loved your country so much that he lived in it and died in it. And Mahine sang again, more loudly, the first words of the song. Ik wil nicht was soll es bedeuten, dass ich so traurig bin. Ein Märchen aus uralten Zeiten, das kommt mir nicht aus dem Sinn. Gaston listened with admiration, astonishment, and perplexity. It suddenly came back to him how this original Brazilian had sworn when the chest caught his clothes. But, monsieur, I thought— Are you, then, a German? Mahine, after a second, laughed. But, Gaston, am I then an enemy? Gaston examined him in the moonlight. Well, he answered slowly, if your country and mine are at war— What has that to do with us? As you just now so truly said, you have found that your country's quarrel was not cause enough for you to leave Persia, and so have I. Voilà tout. He examined Gaston in turn. But I thought you knew all the time. Such is fame. I flattered myself that your Monsieur Guy would leave no one untold, whereas he has left us the pleasure of a situation more piquant, after all, than I supposed. We enjoy the magnificent moonlight of the south. We admire a historic river under its most successful aspect, and we do not exalt ourselves because our countrymen, many hundreds of miles away, have lost their heads. He smiled over the piquancy of the situation. Strength is good, he went on in his impressive bass, and courage is better, but reason, as you so justly say, is best of all. For which reason, he added, allow me to recommend to you, my dear Gaston, that you look a little where you are steering. Gaston looked, but he discovered that his moment of cheer had been all too brief. A piquant situation, indeed! The piquancy of that situation somehow complicated everything more darkly than before. If there were reasons why he should not go away with the others, as they had all taken it for granted that he would do, was that a reason why he, Gaston, whose father had lost a leg at Gravelotte, should do this masquerading German a service? All the German's amiability and originality did not change that. Perhaps, indeed, that explained the originality and amiability. The German, at any rate, did not seem to trouble himself about it. When Gaston next looked over his shoulder, Mahine was lying flat on his back in the bottom of the boat, with his hands under his head and his eyes closed. And so he continued to lie, silent and apparently asleep, while his troubled companion, hand on wheel and beret on ear, steered through the waning moonlight of the Couronne. End of section 13.